Hey, what's up? This is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com, and we are concluding our series getting the most out of your stock plugins from your DAW. This video is going to be focusing mostly on our last category of plugins, which are the color categories, and that covers everything from distortion, overdrive, saturation, and things that add color to your sound. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Let's start off by highlighting the Amp Simulator plugin in Ableton Live. Now this is pretty straightforward. It's emulating a guitar amplifier. It doesn't mean that you have to only use this on guitar tracks. You can basically use this on any track you want. And I normally use it on synthesizers, drums, even sometimes on vocals to add some really cool character. And when it comes to distortion and overdrive plugins and things like that, I tend to think of them as attitude boosters. They are what give more attitude to the characteristic of that sound. So for instance, here is a bass patch without the amp. And now here it is with the amp. Just more attitude. It's just really gritty and it just gets a lot nastier. And you can control the gain, meaning if you really are cranking, get some crazy distortion and saturation by cranking the gain. And what I would do is crank the gain all the way up, maybe even lower the volume, just so that it's not just going to be overwhelming. Or you can lower the gain so you can get just a hint of that attitude. And then you can adjust more of the bass that's going through the amplifier, less of it, middle, treble. And so it's really straightforward. And what I like about this, it gives you the ability to keep the signal at mono, or you can keep it dual, stereo, left and right imaging. Now, similar to the amp simulator, you also have a cabinet simulator as well. This is, they kind of go hand in hand. You don't necessarily always have to use the cabinet plugin, but it's cool to emulate the actual speaker cabinet that the sound is coming out of. So here with the cabinet plugin, you can say you have one 12-inch speaker, maybe two 12-inch speakers, four 12-inch, things like that. And you could decide what kind of, is the microphone near on axis, near off axis, or is it far away so you're getting a lot more of the room. So all this really aims towards changing the overall tonality or adding a lot of that color to the sound. So let's take a listen. So I might want to give more volume. And let's go ahead and dial the dry and wet to see the difference. So it became more in your face without the cabinet. And it just definitely felt a lot further. Let's try a different speaker setting. Let's try going from a condenser mic to a dynamic microphone. And then maybe going dual output on both the amp and the cabinet. Now let's go ahead and bypass both of them. Let's put them back on. So tremendous attitude has just been added to this bass patch, and that's what's really cool about adding these kind of harmonic plugins on any of your sounds. Now we're going to head over to some of the pretty basic, straightforward, they do what they say plugins, and those are things like overdrive and saturation. So we've got the overdrive plugin here on a lead vocal. And the reason for that is because I wanted to actually add crunch and some distortion to the vocal to give it not just the color, but to match the overall tone and the grit and the aggressive vibe that I'm getting with the whole track. So let me just play the track in its entirety. I'm going to play the vocal without the distortion, and then we'll put the overdrive on the vocal. All right, so let's go ahead and bring the vocal in. All right, so I want the vocal to have the same kind of attitude that we're hearing in the rest of the track. So cool thing I would sometimes do is use an overdrive plugin. So I've got the Overdrive plugin right here, and let's just exaggerate a little bit and scale it back. So here's the vocal. I'm standing my ground. Might be a little too much, so you can balance out the dry and wet, and you can decide how much drive or distortion you're adding to the vocal here. I'm standing my ground. Remember when we talked about EQs, how they help shape the tone? Well, this is somewhat like an EQ knob. When you use the tone knob here, if it's all the way to the right or more tone, the distortion will be a lot brighter. The more to the left, the more warmer and darker the distortion is going to be. I'm standing my ground. So that's all going to depend on the context of the mix. If I want the vocal to be a little brighter and stand out in the mix, then I can kind of turn up the tone a little bit more. And then you also have a filter embedded in this Overdrive, so you can just focus on a specific frequency to distort. I'm standing my ground. So it's just focusing the distortion on the 300 hertz area here. You can go open it up so it actually carries it distorts a much broader spectrum. I'm standing my ground. And then the dynamics in this Overdrive will kind of act as if it just folds any of the transients, or kind of acts as a compressor, but it just flatlines any of the transients of the performance. I'm standing my ground. It's something that you would normally experience when you clip, or when you're digital clipping and you go past zero, or in a sense when you're saturating on tape or things like that. It'll just kind of smooth out the transients, or really just kind of level everything out. So I want a little bit more dynamic, so I'm going to scale that back here. I'm going to leave the dry and wet maybe at 20% and scale the drive. I just want a little bit of attitude. So let's A/B it. Let's have the vocal without it. I'm standing my ground. And this is with it. I'm standing my ground. Cool. So it's getting the grit back onto the vocal. It's adding the angst and the attitude that I want, so that it actually, meets the same type of vibe that the track is giving out. Let's listen to it in the mix. I'm standing my ground. I'm standing my ground. Now, Saturator is going to be doing something similar to that. So we'll put the saturator on here. Now, when you record any audio into a digital environment, a digital audio workstation, in this case Ableton, or maybe Pro Tools or Studio One or Fruity Loops for you, what you record in is exactly what you're going to get out. And that's the beauty of recording digitally. It's very clean. As opposed to recording any audio in an analog environment, where if you saturate or record onto a tape machine, you're getting some of the characteristics of that device. Or working on a console, you're going to have some of the imprint of that device on the recording. And so, since digital recordings won't have that, you can use plugins like Saturator or any type of analog saturation emulating plugins to add that color back onto the digital recording. So here we have, let's take a look at the saturator, and we're going to take a look at the dynamic tube, and then we'll take a look at Redux. And these are all different types of distortions. But starting with the saturator, saturator is adding some of that saturation that you would get when printing in an analog ecosystem, or a digital one as well. So here we have it set to analog clip, and I'm cranking the drive up maybe like 5 dB, and then I'm going to reduce the output about 4 dB, so that it's not just boosting the volume by cranking the drive. I'm adding the characteristics that I want, and I'm just kind of maintaining and balancing out the output. So it's very subtle. And so you can just exaggerate that more, get more of the analog clipping by just cranking up the drive. And then down here, you have the controls to focus in on the lower frequencies and just how much attention you're going to have the saturation applied to the low frequencies. So if we crank the bass, so you get more of that broken speaker effect. So really cool to experiment and come up with unique individual sounds and character to your sounds. Then you can change the type of saturation. You go from the analog clipping over to a soft sine, which will and medium curve and hard curve. And these are all great to get more, just more of a punch of that saturation. And hard curve becomes just a lot more in your face. And then you can head over to some of the other ones like digital clipping, which we'll do here with the Redux. But as you can see, when you clip or when you go past 0 dB in the digital world, it's a lot harsher than it is in the analog world. As you can see, it's a lot smoother here. So you can do that. You can also then choose Wave Shaper, which allows you to create your own type of distortion curve. So all this really adds some crazy amount of characteristic and attitude to your sounds. So I'm going to go right back to analog clip. I just want a little bit more of that color on there, and I'll do it the same exact way. We'll leave the drive up by 5 dB, and I'll put at 4. And similarly, the dynamic tube is doing the same exact thing, but this is now focusing not just on analog saturation, but this is the saturation you would get from tubes when you're running through vacuum tube devices. So that gives you a unique individual type of saturation. You can hear somewhat of that fluttering going on the bottom end. So this is also cool to use on, sometimes might even use this on vocals to give some more of that warm tube effect, as if you were running through a tube preamp or something like that. And so here is the digital distortion Redux, which is focusing only on distorting through digital means. So it will downsample. It's going to strip away some of the bits away so it actually looks or actually sounds more pixelated, if that makes any sense. So this is as if you took a cool photo on your iPhone, but then you downgraded the quality, or you took away all the pixels of that photo down to like an old school Nokia flip phone, right? If you ever try to send a really high quality picture to someone who can't handle, or they have to actually downgrade that quality of a photo, it seems all blotchy and blurry. Well, that's kind of what you're doing here with the audio, with the digital distortion. So you can choose between the soft or hard. And digital distortion is a great way to get a really cool tone. Daft Punk has been really notorious for using them on getting that really cool type of bass talky type of vibe. So I'll solo the bass here, and we'll put the digit, and you get that. So it almost sounds like the bass is trying to talk or say something. So digital distortion is really cool for that effect. Now, I know I didn't go in depth with every single plugin, and that's why I focused in on the 4 categories, because every other plugin that I didn't mention will either fall into one of those categories. And I feel like if you can get a good grasp of those 4 categories, if you understand the tools that are in each of those categories, you will have a really good understanding of how to actually get the sound that you're looking for from your projects. So I hope this series has been helpful for you and encouraging in any way. And as my gift to you for watching not only just this video, but any of the videos, I like to send you a sample pack filled with construction kits, loops, samples, one-shots, so that you can actually start making music and apply everything that you've learned through the series onto shaping the sound of that music. It's yours absolutely free. Just click the link below in the description box. or you could visit www.beatacademy.com/pack and download this sample pack absolutely free today. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.